Thank you, Vanya. A lot to learn. I'm going to try and see if I can share my screen, which we've been trying to. So if you just bear with me a few minutes, I'll try and see if I can share, which I automatically thought I would get into trouble with, but um, just bear with me a second. Can everybody see that? No? Oh dear. We did just try and share it a little bit a few minutes ago. Um, can you see that? Yes. Thank you very much. So yes, Banya, thank you very much. Uh, just to say that I am Aysha Ahmed, and I have been working in the field of child protection, children safeguarding for many, many years. But one of my sort of work interest always remained was to look at domestic violence. And as an undergraduate, I kind of started that process and continued with it. So I've been working with domestic violence services, and also made a lot of community work in relation to raising awareness within the Bangladeshi community, both through the local media and being quite vocal in the community through conferences involving the faith community as much as I can possibly do. So just to add to that, today, thank you very much for Oxford Against Cutting for asking me to come and talk about barriers to services, because I think it's a really essential area, which is often quite significantly misunderstood when we speak about minority communities. And I think, in terms of domestic violence and the experiences that Bangladeshi women have, I thought that was my starting point for my research. So I will share quite a bit about the issues that I've highlighted as part of barriers to services and restrictions by Bangladeshi women. So I thought it would be a good start to say, why are we discussing barriers? I mean, obviously, within domestic violence, 1 in 4 women are victims of violence at some point in their lives. And I think to begin the dialogue, begin discussing the barriers, I think the terms of reference is important for me to be absolutely clear that I'm talking about domestic violence against women by male perpetrators. And that could be anybody within their immediate relationship, husband. But when you look at South Asian community, and because I'm talking about Bangladeshi community, I'll make references to Bangladeshi community. There are multiple perpetrators that are within the home, and I'll explore that a little bit more. So I wanted to talk to you all about an overview of the discussion about the research, and potentially provide a better understanding of what domestic violence is within the community, and what are the barriers, the specific barriers that Bangladeshi women talk about. What I found was that there's a lot of gaps in understanding the diversity of women's experiences, even within the Bangladeshi community. Not everyone will experience the same in relation to being a Bangladeshi, being a woman, and also being a victim of domestic abuse. The challenges that the women that I spoke to face, and the barriers that are not only cultural, religious, but also societal difficulties that they experience in terms of either reporting or speaking about violence in the home. And I wanted to share my sort of discussion around perceived professional perspective of women. And I thought visibility and invisibility of Bangladeshi women, because one of what has been something that I've found is that there's a lot of discussion around women being victims of violence, but they're not visible to services, they're not visible to research, they're not visible to action groups that I've worked with. Also, when we talk about Bangladeshi women, there is a perception about extended family and the role of the extended family within the wider family setting. And sometimes that role can be portrayed quite negatively, and we miss the positivity of the extended family and the support that could provide to women. So what are the challenges for Bangladeshi women? I think I spoke about cultural insensitivity, and I'll explore that a little bit more. So through my research, what I looked at was obviously the inequalities in gender within the Bangladeshi community and role specific that is given to women. From very early on, girls are taught to be obedient, being able to ensure that the men are in a powerful position, they're the head of the home. And so therefore, there is a difference of parenting in how girls are parented to how boys are parented. Although the gap is reducing with obviously the younger generation of parents, there is still that level of inequality that is gender-based and role-specific within Bangladeshi community. We talk about the cultural sensitivities. There is a sort of perception of a Bangladeshi family that can often be racially insensitive. It would be that they feel that they're discriminated against because they are Bangladeshi, they're women. The challenge has always been that that is not explored and that is not known. There's not enough known of the fear of cultural sensitivity, racial prejudices, and why women feel that that's a challenge for them when they speak about domestic abuse. Through my research, access to Bangladeshi women was a major difficulties and a methodological kind of challenge for me. The reason that was because there's a perception within the community that women don't want to speak to people who are outside of their family network. They don't feel that they should be sharing their personal, private matters with someone who is from, even if you're from the same community. So my positionality was something that I shared religious background as well as culture and linguistic background. But even then, women were reluctant to speak to me because they did not feel that that was a matter for public knowledge. Women are also very concerned about how they'll be perceived politically and locally. And there's a lot of conflict in relation to their background, if you like. It doesn't help with the sort of injustice as they see it through lots of organizations, both statutory organizations and people in authority, and how they have experienced that lack of support often has been a challenge for them to come forward. Sometimes women don't accept that their experience is abusive. So they talk about lots of things that happens within a marriage that should be acceptable. They don't challenge behaviors that are, if it isn't physical and if there isn't a physical, sort of, for example, if there isn't a bruise on a woman, they don't talk about the coercive control. They don't talk about the constant belittling, because they see it as part and parcel of marriage, part and parcel of being within an extended family environment. And you learn to adjust and you learn to manage and live within a extended family environment. Women also don't want to talk about domestic violence because the fear of moving away from everything that they know, their network, they feel that the services that will be provided are insensitive to their needs as who they are. So often Bangladeshi people are majority Muslim people. So when they move away from their immediate locality, they fear loss of religious identity. They fear loss of religious food, for example, something as basic as that. Children not being able to learn what they've been learning. And so therefore that becomes a massive challenge in order to make a decision as to what they need to do. Making the marriage work at any cost is the first priority women speak about. They speak about the stigma of making a decision the dishonoring of the family and what it means for them right at that moment, but also what does it mean for them and their children, particularly their female children, if they made a decision to move away from their family. I've mentioned earlier the resistance of people not wanting to talk about abuse, and that is because there is a fear of issues of confidentiality. Lots of people feel that within the Bangladeshi community, there's a lot of discussion that goes on. Everybody shares all the information. So even if they spoke to a researcher who would take them through all the ethical difficulties, issues, and confidentiality, there is that fear that it will come out. And so therefore they will be known as somebody who is a victim of abuse. Specific barriers for women that they spoke about quite at length, actually, starts off mainly with self-blame. So they always find that whatever the incidence of abuse that has happened is their fault. And they will have people within either their household or within their network who will also say, well, you must have done something. So women feel that the self-blame becomes a difficulty if they talk about domestic violence within the home. The embarrassment and the shame that also comes with it because you are a victim of violence. So therefore the focus remains on the victim rather than on the perpetrator. There's a lot of sense within lots of the Bangladeshi women of dishonoring the family. They will live within an abusive relationship for a very long time before they will seek even support within their network. And what I've noticed, what I found is that before anybody knows, the network will know that this person is a victim of domestic violence. Any official involvement, the network will be aware of it for a longer period of time and will be providing informal support because they still want the woman to make the marriage work and remain within the family, which is the most important priority often women talk about for them. There might be others who prevent them from reporting, and that would be mainly female within their network, would be mothers who will look at, as I've mentioned, that they will talk about your action as in the woman's action and the reaction that will create a ripple effect on her female child and their prospect in life of marriage and community and also honor of her and her female child. So there's a lot of work that goes with the woman through mothers, through mother-in-law, sister-in-law, sisters to say, try and make it work. So that the emphasis on making it work. They don't want to talk about abuse because it is still seen as a private matter that the family should be dealing with, family should be helping and supporting, because that has impact on the children and the effects of children that they think by supporting mom to stay within a relationship is protecting the children. And I think that's really, really important because mothers also feel that staying within a two-parent relationship or where the mother is victim of abuse is still protecting her children. There is a significant fear that women talk about is losing their children. They talk about if they report and if they kind of go over to people like, for example, social services, school, or police, that there is a fear that the children will be removed, that mothers will be blamed for that the children have been removed. And so therefore they tend not to go and talk about domestic violence straight away. Being separated from the family and from the marriage, and also the fear of threats of divorce. And here I'm talking about the Islamic divorce, which is known as the three talaq, which is a pronunciation of a divorce that a husband can give to his wife. And lots of the women have very limited knowledge about how a divorce can be given and what does a divorce actually means when a husband pronounces it. But that fear of limited knowledge and the fear of the fact that they don't want to be seen as a divorcee stops them reporting any abuse to services. I think I've already spoken about stigma and sort of an honor of the family, but also the other bit that often is an unspoken barrier is being a divorcee within a community is a huge difficulties for women. They talk about, patriarchal society where women are always being seen as subordinate, but also if you're a divorcee, you're an easy target, you're an easy kind of person to be either manipulated or abused further. Women talk about marrying within, I've put the Bengali word for class, marrying within their zat, which means married within your class. Lots of the women that I spoke to, they talk about marrying below their status. And when they say that, that is below their class. So when things go wrong, they have their maternal family saying, well, you married beyond our status, so therefore, what could you expect? Equally, if they marry somebody who was above them, they feel that their experience of that is then manipulated to say, well, you don't belong into that family, you don't know that kind of standard, so therefore you deserve to be abused because you don't belong. So as a very fine line of being belonging within the community and being isolated. Threats of harm to children. Women talk about significant threats, not only to their children. So if a mother is a victim of domestic violence and something happens to the children, it's always her fault because she hasn't been a good mother or she hasn't been able to look after her children. The parents have women have talked about children being used against them. So that would be within an extended family setting where the grandmothers, mainly grandmothers, would be saying things like, your mother isn't a good mother, she doesn't know how to look after you, she doesn't know how to teach you. So it becomes a threat that children are used against the mother while she's still the victim. Clearly victim blaming, but also putting it onto the woman as a cultural issue, that within the culture and within the marriage, the woman is the one who should be tolerating because of the fact that she's the daughter-in-law within the home. Extended families threats isn't just in the UK. I've had women talk about significant level of threats of people who are abroad. So it'd be parents, siblings, married siblings, to say if there were anything happening in this country that has a ripple effect onto the extended family abroad. And women want to protect that because that's culturally what they are taught, to protect the honor, not only of themselves, but also honor of their maternal family and beyond with their siblings. The other barriers, if we look at religious support and religious barriers, women talk about the mosque being male dominated, which is in actuality it is in many counties across the country. Imams are all men. Women feel that this is a significant barrier for them to go and speak to somebody. So, for example, if a man was threatening her with divorce, Islamic divorce, would she go and speak to an imam? Most women have said no, they wouldn't, because they would feel that the focus will be more on keeping the family together and more focus on forgiving and forgetting and keeping the family going. Perpetrators are also quite well known within the communities. They are community members who might be well thought of, and the women often talk about other people may not be able to deal with the perpetrators. Therefore, the women will refuse or be reluctant to go and speak to someone within the community. So I then looked at barriers of reporting. So what is it that stops women reporting to services? Well, one of the things I've found is that women will never approach a service on their own to say, I'm a victim of domestic violence. It is always with a secondary presenting problem. So for example, women will go to school and they'll talk about lots of different issues that are happening with their child. It is only when there is a trust built that they will disclose that they are victim of violence at home. The cultural acceptance often is a barrier because people often think within a minority community, these things happen. These are part and parcel of marriage, and you deal with it within your community. And I think lots of women take that literally to say, well, services might not be able to support me, so therefore I'm not going to report it. They also want to belong. They don't want to report the perpetrator to get them into trouble because they still want to remain within the home and within the family, which is important for them. So therefore, if they speak about it, it alienates them and isolates them within the family. There's lots of issues around racism, lots of issues about being treated differently, regardless of language, especially spoken language. So lots of the women I spoke to are British-born Bangladeshis who don't have the issues of language. Of course, there are women who struggle to talk or share their experiences because of language limitation. But lots of the British Bangladeshi women have the same kind of barriers that are cultural barriers, that are religious barriers that prevent them talking about their experiences. One of the significant barriers that I thought also came was that they did not want to pursue the case through the criminal justice system. And the reason for that is there has always been a distrust of organization and the support that they provide. For example, lots of women will not speak to the police because they feel that the police will not help them. They will not go to social services because there isn't anything that they can provide that looks like them, for example, or that they feel that they actually understands their cultural background in order to get that support. Fear of being disowned and isolated from the family. Women talked about when they did finally report that they've been removed, and one of the focus of the organizations that they've come across was for them to be removed out of their particular network. Not necessarily what the women want. They do understand that there may be a need for it, but what my research cohort talked about is that wasn't even an option given to say, would you want to stay here and we'll put support services. It was more of fear about not knowing what the cultural parameters are. And so therefore they offered removal of the women, removal of the children to unknown areas where their services did not represent the women that or their background. And immigration status in some cases. Lots of the women come to the UK on spouse visas. They have limitation that they need to then apply or reapply, and they fear that if they talk about abuse, that this may not happen, and therefore going back to their maternal family is not an option because that would be seen as a disgrace. It's seen as somebody who wasn't able to work at their marriage, and therefore acceptance by the maternal family is also very difficult. And they talked about lack of understanding and compassion by agencies. So, for example, they accept what was presented but will not support in terms of the sort of making things better for the women and children who may have had the courage to come and report. So then what is it that can be put in place, if you like, to help and support women who do manage to report violence against their partners? There is an overemphasis on culture. And I think, the fact that women talk about, lots of organizations say, well, it happens in the Bangladeshi community, it happens because you're a Muslim. And I think the fact that it happens in every community, it happens in every society, every status, every income, is something that lots of women struggle to understand. But also they say that being so tunnel vision focused in cultural sort of aspects of it obscures the risks and the concerns that the mothers have. And their fears and their experiences quite readily disregarded because of the fact that they're Bangladeshi and because of the fact that they're women of color. Issues are more complicated when extended families are involved. And I think there is a perception, and I say that from not only my research, but also because I'm a practitioner and I've been practicing within children and families for many, many years, that there is a negative perception of extended family. And that plays a significant part in what level of support women get. What really does need to happen, I suppose, is to have more knowledge around cultural attunement, cultural practices, and support networks where women in my research made alliances of support within their extended family. So you've had example of mother-in-laws and sister-in-laws who've been abusive and are perpetrators, but you also had sister-in-laws who have gone out of their way to support the woman to come out of the family so that she is not subjected to the abuse that she has been experiencing within the home. I think the important thing for organizations to remember is that family plays a significant role within the Bangladeshi community. And that needs to be positively communicated and on strength-based work, which is culturally appropriate, culturally sort of sensitive to the needs of women. At the moment, when a woman says, I'm not going to leave, it is seen as her resisting to accept support. Then it becomes a discussion, if she's got children, around failure to protect. You're not taking action for your children. What the women have said is family is important. They protect their children before they protect themselves. And when organizations come in, because of the level of lack of information about culture, they feel that their strategies are often dismissed readily or not accepted, that they have managed to protect their children through the period of abuse that they've experienced. So there's a lot that I feel needs to be learned, a lot of knowledge that are out there that needs to be shared in a positive manner about culture and religion. Respecting and working with the dilemmas that the women have. So, looking at why is it that they don't want to move? It's not that they don't want to move because they've just been difficult. It is about society. It is about perception. It is also about the fears that they have. And I've kind of outlined some of the fears already, but also understanding their multi-identities. Women of color have lots of added difficulties and they experience their domestic abuse very different to their counterparts. So, for example, a white British woman would experience domestic violence very differently to a Bangladeshi woman, a Muslim Bangladeshi woman, who will have multi-layers of roles and responsibilities that she would have to fulfill before she makes a decision for herself. And in understanding that, I think organization will be in a better position to support women who have those dilemmas. So one of the things I also feel that work around faith-based and healthy relationship that could be developed and built on is to see religion as a positive aspects of a woman's life. Lots of women who may not describe themselves as religiously practicing, although in Islam there is no practicing and non-practicing. You're either a Muslim or you're not a Muslim. But they see religion as a positivity rather than a restriction. So when they talk about being in need of support, the first thing they talk about is increasing their prayers, increasing talking to God, increasing their activities, religious activities. they see it as a true guidance. They see it as supportive. However, when they talk about it within the external services, that is often seen as, women described as being told that they're radicalized, they are too strict, they're backward. So those kind of discussion are unhelpful, but faith-based discussion don't need to be unhelpful. I've got a will here, which is the healthy relationship will. And I suppose one of the discussion I have found really helpful is to start the conversation within the parameters of faith. So when you look at family and community relationship, what does your faith say? And this will actually talks about verses of the Quran. It talks about where it says, you can show positive communication. Where does it say that men are accountable for their actions? So that becomes a really good basic tool to have a conversation. You don't necessarily have to be a Muslim in order to do that. If you have the tool, you can actually use that to say, this is what your religion say. Okay, maybe I will go and find out a little bit more in order to help and support you. So acknowledge the challenges, acknowledge the faith that gives that basis for women to have those conversations. And it is also helpful for them to understand their religion better in order to protect themselves and their children. Faith and spirituality has been shown to provide a source of strength for women in comfort, in building their relationship, in building their trust. And also, one of the most important things I found was also to talk to their children. Women in Bangladeshi community do not talk to their children about abuse. Children are always left out of conversation because culturally it's an adult matter. And so therefore adults will deal with that. With this will, lots of women have started to talk about healthy relationship, talk about their experiences at home with their children, age appropriate. And they feel that kind of gives them a basis of having a communication that might be helpful for their children. For practitioners, one of the things I would say is that have the curiosity of wanting to know rather than blanket statement that alienates a community or alienates women who have a lot of strong faith and also are aware of cultural disempowerment that happens. If people don't know something, that it is okay to say, I don't know about your culture or your religion, I can find out. And there are lots of people within the community who will be able to guide practitioners. Talk about basis of religion, because religion in Islam is sort of, for Bangladeshi women, being a focal point. When things work well, they go back to thanking God for the blessings. But when things go wrong, they go back and seek forgiveness, even if they're not the perpetrator, or ability to forgive their perpetrator, which is a significant level of understanding that needs to be explored. It's very limited, it needs to be explored. The other way forward, I think, is a better understanding of the practices that women who are experiencing domestic violence. Why is it that they have so many barriers? We talked about their multi-layered identity and multifaceted kind of way that they manage and support their children and themselves, but also the authorities and organization that works with them need to understand the timings. And when I say that, I'll use an example. When I was speaking to a woman who had experienced domestic violence during the month of Ramadan, the police wanted to come. They wanted to, that there were male police officers who wanted to come 10 minutes before the breaking of the fast. The concept of the fact that somebody's been fasting, even though she's a victim of abuse, she'll still be within the home. for them to come at a time when the entire family will be sitting down to break their fast was not an appropriate action, but they didn't see it that way. So it's about knowledge, it's about expanding that knowledge, but also have discussions that are very difficult. Talking to women in terms of faith and relationship, there is a misconception about Islam and divorce, and this is significant, that women feel that they cannot divorce their husbands, that Islam prevents them from divorcing, which is inaccurate. And there are lots of information organizations can use to have those discussions with women to say, Islam does not ask you to tolerate abuse. It does not allow you to say you have to stay within a relationship that is not good for your health, both emotional, physical, and mental, and that you as a woman have the right to annul. In Islam, it's a kulla, which means divorce or leave your husband. And those discussions need to happen more now than, we talking about raising awareness. I think lots of information are misinterpreted, because of the fact that very little discussion is happening. There is a fear, and people often don't want to talk about religion because it's a controversial subject, and they don't want to be insensitive, and they don't want to be discriminative. But those difficult discussions do need to happen. And I suppose by doing that, there'll be more communication and links within the communities that are affected. So this is where I talk about visibility and invisibility of women. If we are not talking about those subjects that are difficult or conversation, women remain invisible. There are a handful of women who are professional women who will go out and be vocal and will talk about issues affecting Bangladeshi women, but that's where it remains. It's not moving forward, it's not developing, because other organizations fear of not wanting to be seen as racist or discriminatory prevents women coming forward to talk about domestic violence and violence against their children within the home. I think that's probably about what I have in terms of talking about the barriers. I'm just to sort of add one more point, and that was to be having consistent knowledge about culture, religion, and the practices people have, because at the moment there are inconsistent information that people feel that is correct, and they are grappling with the issues around lots of minority communities, commonalities, similarities, and differences. And I think that's really, really important. There are lots of commonalities, there's lots of similarities, but each community has their own also difficult conversation that they need to have. And that is something that organization needs to be mindful of. Thank you.